Greetings and welcome back to Doctor Who Revisited, where I go through every single episode of Doctor Who from 1963 all the way to 2022 and review them. And this is another one of my personal favorites of the John Pertwee era, specifically the Sea Devils. I really like this episode. It is a really good Third Doctor and Joe story. It is a very good Master story. And on top of that, it introduces a brand new iconic monster that went on to become a much bigger presence in the wider realm of Doctor Who perfectly. And it doesn't, even though it's very much a master story, the name The Sea Devils is in the title, and one does not necessarily overshadow the other, even though technically speaking, it takes a couple of episodes until the Sea Devils properly show up. Even though we do see them earlier, but that's beside the point. So this is us revisiting the Master after he was recaptured back at the end of The Demons, the season finale of the previous season. So yeah, we had a couple of serials without the Master, and then he finally shows back up halfway through this season, and he did not lose a step. I mean, even the Doctor himself mentions that he seemed to have put on weight. So yeah, I like that. It was funny, and kind of also shows that the Doctor really does care about the Master, despite everything that's happening or happened between those two characters. And I do love the visit between those two. I love their interactions. The Master being as cold and calculating and as suave as he always is. Even in prison, he tries to trick the Doctor and Joe. He tries to fool them. The Doctor tries to do the same for the Master. And just the whole scene in the prison scene between the Doctor, the Master, and Joe, it's really good. These three characters, these three actors, just have some of the best chemistry in all of Doctor Who, and is one of the biggest reasons why this era of Doctor Who was so good, and why the Master worked so well as a villain. It was the chemistry between John Pertwee and Roger Delgado, mixed in with Katie Manning playing Joe. And it was just electric. It was like you cannot stop watching it. It's just so good. What can I say? As far as location goes, I love the isolated nature of this episode. But basically, for the most part, it takes place either on the prison island that also houses the Navy base, and also the island in the middle of the water, where episodes 1 and 2 primarily take place in. And that's a great use of the environment. I mean, you are dealing with creatures that live underwater. I mean, they're literally called Sea Devils, or rather, they were given the name Sea Devils by the characters in the episode. But the usage of the seafaring environment, I think, worked perfectly for this episode, and it's a really good use of the environment within the John Pertwee era. Remember, this era primarily takes place on Earth, because the Doctor is earthbound because of his exile still. So the showrunners and producers kind of had to play around with locations a lot all throughout this season, because you can't just have every single episode take place in Unit HQ. That sort of becomes boring. So they go to Devil's End. They go through the caves where the Silurians were. They go through the Space Center in the Ambassadors of Death. They go through all these different places and locations to try to shake up the plot a little bit, to try to make it feel as though the Doctor is still traveling around without actually leaving Earth. Obviously, there are some episodes that do take place outside of planet Earth as we know it, and outside of the time period that the Doctor was stuck in, but that's beside the point, because the majority of the episodes do take place on Earth, so they gotta find ways of changing the location without having the Doctor actually travel in the TARDIS. And I think they did it perfectly well in this episode. A slight drawback to that is that there's no Brigadier. There's no Unit, there's no Mike Gates, there's no John Benton, there's no TARDIS even. You don't even get to see the TARDIS in this episode. So this isolation, well, I think it works well for the format that the early John Pertwee era was. You kind of lose some of the main element here, which was Unit, but replace that with the Navy from the Navy base. That the Doctor very quickly establishes a working relationship, sort of way, with the captain, or rather the main officer in charge of that Navy base. And I felt that was really good. That was really necessary for an episode like this, dealing with the Master specifically. If you don't have units, you need some kind of military presence there, right? So I thought that was handled very, very well. The prison warden, I think, was a really, really good character, really funny character. Slight one-dimensional at times, but I do love some of the humor stuff that they do with the character, and I love that he wasn't necessarily completely under the Master's control. There was some of the Master's, shall we say, forced persuasion in this episode, but he didn't, strictly speaking, hypnotized him. He just really convinced him that it would be beneficial to him, and by extension to humanity, if he worked with the Master. And I love that the Master was able to do that. I love that that the Master doesn't necessarily always have to resort to hypnotism being his main weapon against humanity. No, he can persuade people without necessarily hypnotizing them. And I liked the multifacetedness of the Master, and this Master specifically, because he's not only the first, but personally I think he's the best out of all of them. But yeah, so there's a couple episodes taking place with the Master doing what the Master does, convincing people to join his side, going undercover, using the whole "I am the Master and you will obey me" trick, which somewhat seems to be faltering in this episode for some reason. No idea why, but maybe it's just being in prison for who knows how long, how many months he was in that prison. But who cares? I mean, it's mainly just a plot point that gets us from one place to the other. I love the constant traveling back and forth between all the different locations in the episode. And oh yeah, about halfway through the serial, the Sea Devils show up, and I like what they did with the Sea Devils. I like that it's not like what they did with the Silurians, where they really just took their time in introducing them. They showed us a sort of point of view of their three eyes, and then showing us their hands, and so it takes a while until the actual Silurians make a proper appearance. In this episode, it's different. We see their hand first as it attacks a submarine or a ship. I can't remember which one. And then we sort of start to see the silhouette. And then we see a full-on Sea Devil either by the end of episode 1 or by halfway through episode 2, when the Doctor and Joe are on that island recon station or whatever it was. So, yeah, it doesn't take its time introducing the Sea Devils. We get introduced to them pretty much very, very early on. But then they sort of are benched. They're taken to the side for a little bit to focus more on the Master. And again, this is just as much of a Master story as it is a Sea Devil story. I love the fencing duel between the Doctor and the Master. It's a really, really great moment between those two characters that not only shows the skill that these two characters have, but it's a great character building moment between those two characters, that the Doctor defeats the Master a couple of times and then takes the sword and throws it back at him to continue their duel. And a lot of them, technically speaking, get to see that duel happening twice in the end of one episode leading up to the cliffhanger, and at the beginning of the next episode, which also ends with what would have been the cliffhanger with the Master throwing the knife. I love that. I love that as the cliffhanger for this episode. I think the serial, for a 6-parter, it does cliffhangers really, really good, I think. And so it's really just a highlight of how well written and well directed and well choreographed this whole story is. And another thing that I really want to highlight for this episode, it's a really, really, really good showcase of Jo Grant's skills, where she's able to escape. She overpowers soldiers that are twice her size, and she outruns them, and she outsmarts everybody. She comes back and frees the Doctor multiple times during this episode. This episode is really just a very big highlight of how great of a companion Jo Grant is. She escapes through the ventilation shafts, as it's a very Doctor Who trope at this point, I believe. And she really does take the initiative a lot throughout this episode. There are the moments where she reverts back into the traditional, oh no, Doctor, oh look, Doctor motif, but it doesn't happen very often. And she, for the most part, she really just shows how big of a badass she is and why she's one of the best companions of all time. I love the shootout match between the Navy people and the Sea Devils, both in the prison and then later in the Navy base. There's some really great action in it, and even though this is technically kind of a repeat of the Silurians, where the Doctor tries to broker peace between these two characters, between these two races, which was made even more apparent by the fact that the Sea Devils are basically just another branch, another evolutionary branch of the Silurians. They're very, very related to them. The Doctor once again tries to broker peace between these two races, trying to be a peaceful, non-biased mediator between those two species. Except this time he's hampered by the fact that the Master is also there, undermining everything that he's doing. And then again, once again, the humans attack, which of course leads to war between these two races. I love that they keep going back into this well, and the well itself never really gets dry, because this type of conflict is very, very relevant both back in the 70s when they made the episode, and also still very, very much relevant today with certain things going on between different countries in 2023, which is where this is being recorded, obviously. So I love that. One thing that I can't say that I love too much, but I understand it and I appreciate it for what it is the bureaucratic government guy that just shows up at the the Navy base and just starts lording his presence over everybody, asking for breakfast, taking over everything, initiating the attack on the Sea Devils. I don't like the character, but it's primarily because he's kind of a dick, and you're supposed to not like the character. Again, I understand what they were going with this character, and it works very, very well in the story, and the actor who plays him does it to perfection. I love the commitment to the character. It's just, the character is a dick, and you're not supposed to like him, so I don't like him. And I love that he does get his comeuppance several times in the episode, especially by the Doctor himself. And this is really kind of a staple of the Jon Pertwee era in and of itself, as like these overzealous, self-confident bureaucrats that just show up out of nowhere, asserting their dominance over everybody. That's kind of a staple of the Jon Pertwee era, and no, I think this guy does it very, very well. I love the scene taking place in the Sea Devil base. I love that the Doctor basically gets to use his signature line, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow. I'm pretty sure that's the only time that this sentence is said out loud in its entirety. Reverse the polarity of the neutron flow. That's really where that line became synonymous with the Third Doctor and with the Doctor in general. So yeah, I love that. This episode really is a treasure trove of a lot of really great moments, like the fencing moment with between the Doctor and the Master, like the Master being a fan of pop culture, children TV shows in the prison, like Reverse the Polarity of the Neutron Flow, obviously the Sea Devils. Yeah, this episode really does have a lot of really great, good stuff for Doctor Who fans to geek out over, and I love that. But yeah, and of course, the Master escapes once again in the usual way that he tends to do. And yeah, once again, of course, trying to broker peace between these two races amounted to nothing, which unfortunately is a recurring theme whenever the Silurians or the Sea Devils show up. It happens a lot, both in the classic series, in the modern series, on Big Finish, and all other stories. Wherever these wherever these races show up, it's unfortunate, but it seems like we'll never be able to reach a proper understanding between humans and Silurians or their Sea Devil cousins. But whatever. It makes for good Doctor Who storytelling, and I'm all here for it. So yeah, I really, really love this story. This is a story I would highly recommend for people who never watched the Jon Pertwee era. Again, it has the unfortunate downside of not having Unit in it. Unit is mentioned a lot of times throughout the episode, but they never actually turn up because of the location and stuff. But this is a really, really great example of how great the Jon Pertwee era was as a whole. It's a really good Doctor and Joe story. The sonic screwdriver is used to great effect in this story. It's a really good introduction to a new villain. It's a great master story. It's a great story for Joe Grant. It's a great military story. It's a great showcase of how current science and technology and military advancements were used in the John Pertwee era, and just an all-around great Third Doctor adventure, start to finish. It's a really, really good story, and I really, really like it. So that is it for my review on it. Let me know what you think of Doctor Who and the Sea Devils, or just the Sea Devils as it was prominently called. And I will see you in the next one. So until the next one, everybody, I am the master, and you will obey me. You will obey me and only me. Hi there. Thank you for watching the video. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and tell your friends. I'll see you next time.